All right. So, Tracy, how are you?
I'm doing well, thank you.
Good to see you. I have a question. I always want to know, how do you pronounce your last name?
Frein.
Frein. Okay.
Yeah.
Is that Germain?
Yeah, it's German. Yeah, that the E is silent, and I even all through grade school, all through academics, I've teachers have had problems with it. I think only one or two people in my whole life have gotten it correct.
We heard that from John Siderius as well. His name is Greek and it's incredibly hard to pronounce. All right. So, Tracy, this is going to be season 5 of the podcast, and I'm changing the format up just a little bit. I want to start with 5 rapid fire questions to kind of get to the meat of the thing right up front in the beginning. So, some rapid fire, right off the top of the head questions, and then we'll get into your backstory and the appeal system. So, are you ready?
Sure.
You ready for our game? What is the one thing you love to create or do? What is the top number one thing you love to do?
Portraits.
Okay. What is the one thing you hate to create the most or do?
Well, I have to say it was abstract, but now it's changing.
Really
It's
interesting.
it's changing now. I'm trying to now combine abstract with the hyperrealism.
Abstract hyperrealism. That's like an oxymoron.
It is.
Okay, here comes the doozy. What is the number one top selling thing that you do or make, your art or product? What is the one piece of art, design, style, whatever that makes you the most money?
Well, actually, probably my graphics work.
Okay. All right. What is the funniest or weirdest piece of art you've ever made or sold or kind of experienced? This could also
Oh,
be like, what is the weirdest thing that's happened to your art? Have you ever like had it stolen or lost or dropped it or got it damaged or just like what's the weirdest thing that's ever happened to you and your art?
I donated a couple pieces to a foundation, and one of them sold, and the other one was stuffed away in a closet for 4 or 5 years, and they found it.
They just stuffed it in a closet and forgot
Well, so
about it.
it wasn't. They didn't. Nobody bid on it, so they didn't return it to me. They just stuffed it in the closet, and about 5 years later, somebody contacted me and said they found it. I had forgotten all about the piece.
Oh man. All right. And last, number 5. What is the one most important piece of business advice you'd give to yourself if you were just starting out as a newbie artist?
Make it your own, and it's kind of the mantra I've always had, and I've kind of stressed on young artists or even students that I teach in at Little Street Art Center is make it your own. I think you spend too much time trying to chase other artists and trying to be like other artists and copy their styles to the point where you get frustrated and it's not even really yours any longer.
Mm,
Um, and
you think
then
that causes burnout?
I think it causes burnout and frustration.
Yeah.
And you try to figure out why, if I'm drawing like or painting like so and so, why am I not in this show, or why am I not winning awards or selling pieces? So make it your own.
Good advice. Good advice. Find your niche, right?
Right.
That is really hard to do. All right. So that is a great segue into art. So we always do the artist appeals is, the appeals system is an acronym. It stands for art, product, presentation, educate with story or how do you educate your audience, amplifying, getting bigger, licensing and contract deals or terms in basic English that anybody can understand. And finally, success. How do you measure success? So that's how I keep the podcast organized and kind of look for these common threads that all
Mhm.
of the creatives have. So now that we've covered our new rapid fire 5 question game, let's start with art. So you do hyper realism. What is hyper realism? And show us that big, beautiful piece behind you.
Well, hyperrealism is, I mean, most people, they identify with realism opposed to abstract because they can understand it, and it's something that they see in real life. Hyperrealism is, my portraits are hyperrealism, um, lifelike, to the point where they even get as close as maybe drawing the pores of the skin, or even with my subjects aren't perfect because nobody's perfect looking. Even the flaws in my subjects are shown. One of my models has um, scars on her body, and even the nudes I did with her, I could probably just make a drawing with a perfect body, perfect skins, but I end up putting the scars in that with her tattoos, with the blemishes on her face, with the freckles on her body to show that
So
she's
it's
beautiful,
real. It's
but
real.
it's
Yeah.
real. Yeah.
Yeah. I have scars on my face. You probably can't see them, but I had forceps when I was born, and I
Oh.
have some little round scars there that when the light hits just right, you can totally see them. But it's personality, right? It's
Mm-hmm.
experience.
That's
So
all of
you
us.
don't hide those things.
No.
Oh, I love it. And you do tend to draw a lot of female models. Um, but you have a special technique, do you not?
Yes. I have
Tell
a
me about it.
technique. I have a technique called, I coined it as drawing by subtraction. And it's not really a technique that I made up, but it's a technique that I made up for color pencil. And
Okay.
actually, I have it patented, and I also have the name registered for color pencil art.
Wait a minute.
And
Wait a minute. Patented.
yeah,
How do you patent an art technique? That's a new one for me.
you just go to the patent office and online, and there's some forms to fill out, and you have to describe what it's being used for. So the
Hmm.
patent that I have for that is just used a technique used for color pencil, and then I have to describe what that technique is. Um,
Did you have to do a patent search or get a patent attorney involved?
yeah, there's a patent attorney that you can get online too that'll help you kind of guide through the process,
Uh-huh.
and help with all the documentation. And then the patent office actually assigns you a patent number.
And what's the point of having a patent?
Well, the point is, and I've run into this even in the recent month, is you'll have artists who might take my workshop,
Hmm.
and I don't mind them going back out and teaching other students this technique. But when you advertise it on your website or you advertise on your Facebook page, drawing by subtraction, I'm going to show this my technique, so and so and so, and they don't give me a credit, and they're also using my name, where everybody knows that, especially in the Color Pencil Society, since 2012, that this technique has been patented and it's been trademarked, and this is the way Tracy Frein does all his artwork. Not a few pieces here and there. All his artwork is done this way. So even the national, international art magazines that I've been in have recognized me with this technique.
That is so cool. So that is fascinating because we've talked about copyright on this podcast before and the importance of copyright, but I don't think we've ever talked about any artist patenting anything because normally patent is the territory of engineers or inventors, but you've invented a technique. So tell us a little bit about this technique of drawing through subtraction.
The way I started this was I was doing color pencil art on drafting film. I work on a drafting film. It's semi-translucent.
What is drafting film? Is it like 35 millimeter film, but just bigger?
Oh yeah, well it's almost like an acetate, but it has a frosted front and a frosted back. So
Mm.
the frosted front and the frosted back gives it a little bit of texture that you
Uh-huh.
can adhere your color pencil to. If not, you're drawing directly on acetate, which is clear, and the
Hmm.
color pencil will not adhere to that
Right,
acetate.
right. Back in college, I took a class in animation where we did drawn on film, but you
Mm-hmm.
had to use like a Sharpie
Yeah, you
and
had to use
we
a
drew
Sharpie.
on film. But yeah, you couldn't, there would be no substrate, there would be no texture for the colored pencil.
Right.
Okay, so you use this special substrate, and then
It's
what do you
called
do?
Well, it's called drafting film,
Mhm.
and it's created by a company called Graphics, Grafix,
All right.
and it has a frosted front and a frosted back, and I can tell the different thicknesses of the film. And there's a film that I use that's 5 millimeters thick. So I
Is
had
it
the
big?
film. Well,
Small?
you can get it in small sheets, you can get it in large sheets. The sheets I use are 24 by 36, or I get a roll that's 43 inches wide by 20 yards and just pull it
Okay.
off a roll.
Okay.
So what I do is I lay it down on my table, and then I take a Prismacolor stick, which looks like this. It's the same. It's the same ingredients as a Prismacolor color pencil has,
Yeah.
except in a stick form. This kind of looks
Hmm.
like a pastel stick, but it's solid.
Yeah, it's graphite. Is that it looks pretty shiny. Is that like a
Oh,
hard
right
one,
now,
like a 4H or a 6H?
no, it's just
Oh, it's got
it's bl-
it's
it's
got the
black. Yeah, it
okay.
has. Yeah, so it looks like this. So
Oh,
it's pretty
brilliant.
hard.
Okay.
Yeah. So what I end up doing is I was trying to come up with a different technique for my drawings. I was doing my color pencil drawings in full color.
Hmm.
I wasn't getting the emotion that I wanted to get out of my portraits. They just look like pretty color pencil portraits in full color. So what I thought about doing is the best way to ingrain emotion into your drawings is to cut down on your palette. So instead of just cutting down on the colors, I end up going just black and white. So what I had to do is try to figure out a technique. And I remember a technique back in college where we used to take charcoal, and we used to take charcoal and cover a whole paper with
Yeah.
charcoal stick or charcoal dust. So the
I
whole
I
paper
did
would
that
be black.
exercise. I remember that. That's very classic.
So then you take your eraser,
You
your art
needed
gum eraser,
eraser.
yes,
Yeah.
and you draw with your eraser.
Yeah.
And I loved doing that back in college and even after college. And I decided that if I can figure out how to do this in color pencil, maybe that's something I could try. So I figured out one thing I need to do is I need to get the color pencil into a solvent. So I took the color pencil stick,
Uh-huh.
and then I draw all over, just squiggly lines all over the drafting film.
Uh-huh.
And depending on how dark my drawing is going to be, pretty much I kind of figure out how much pigment I need.
Okay.
After I draw all these squiggles all over the sheet, then I have to turn it into a solvent. So then I take a spray that has terpenoid in it, which is a colorless and odorless blender, and
Mm-hmm.
spray it on the sheet. And then I take a brush and I brush it all into the sheet of drafting film until I
Cool.
get to, so the drafting film is pretty much maybe a 75 to 90% gray covering the film, and there's a lot of texture into it too from the brush.
Mm-hmm.
Then I let it dry.
Yeah.
And then what I do is I'll take the kneaded eraser and a Tombow eraser. It's a little
Okay.
eraser that has a cartridge. And then I'll
Yeah.
start pulling out all the highlights.
Okay.
So
Mm-hmm.
as I'm drawing, I'm pulling out all these midtones and highlights, creating them by pulling away the pigment off of the film with this and the kneaded eraser. And this way, it's almost like peeling an onion. I'm actually scraping it away a percentage at a time to a
Mm-hmm.
point where I have a drawing that may look like this or almost like this. And then I go back in with my color pencil. And this is a very fine color, the very thin it's actually called, but it's a super point of the color pencils in black. And I go back in and I start adding more of the detail that way.
Neat.
Now, I usually never use white.
Mm-hmm.
I try to use the film, which is like a pearlescent looking color.
Okay.
I use that for my highlight.
Right.
Now, if I want
Like a
to add,
watercolor artist would use the paper as the highlights.
right. So I figured out that'll be my hottest highlight. But if I want to go back in and I want to add some more white into an eye, or on the lips or something, or the tip of the nose, just a very hot highlight, then I will
Mm-hmm.
take a white color pencil and just add it sparingly.
Okay.
And then if I need to, I'll go back in with some grays of colored pencil to start filling in some of the transitions.
Hmm.
But usually with the erasers, I can peel away enough pigment and transition some of these grays into lighter colors with just pulling them out of the way. And I don't usually have to use a lot of color pencil or a lot of gray.
Very cool. If I wanted to learn your technique, where would I learn it? Are you offering classes right now that the pandemic's open over
I'm
or
I'm getting
almost
ready to
over?
start almost over. Yeah, I'm getting ready to start offering classes again. I usually offer classes about 2 or 3 workshops a year across the country, and usually maybe a chapter in the Color Pencil Society will sponsor that workshop, and I'll fly out to California or Seattle or the East Coast, West Coast, and perform these workshops. And usually there's about 25 to people, 25 to 30 people in the workshop. So I'm kind of getting together and starting up these classes again and adding some new stuff to the classes.
Fantastic. That's really cool. I'm excited for that. Now, let's talk about how that works. So, that's almost like a product, right? A lot of the artists that I talk to teach. It's one of the best ways to get the word out there. It's free marketing, it's connecting, it's networking. And I've heard over and over again from artists that teaching what they do, their technique, has been one of the most not profitable, not beneficial, but rewarding, surprisingly rewarding
Yeah.
things that they do. Um, do you find it to be that too?
Oh, absolutely. When I walk into a class, a lot of workshops that I've gone to myself, um, you end up sitting in a chair. The instructor's at the front. He or she may have the instructions on a screen and tell you what to do, and you're doing A, B, C, and D to get to the point where this picture looks like what's on the screen.
Right.
I didn't want to do that at all. What I do is when I walk into a conference room for my workshop, for me it's like Vegas. Um, it's kind of like it's like a Vegas show for me. I start working the room, um, even to the point where
Giving out chips,
yeah,
handing out
yeah.
drinks.
but I but I work with every individual artist on their piece. And what I usually do is in most workshops, they give you a standard photo or a standard um, image to work with. And so everybody's doing the same image. What I do with my workshop is I help the students, even before they get to the workshop, come up with a reference photo for that workshop, something that
Hmm.
has emotion to it, something that means a lot to you. So you're interested in working on it in the workshop, even after the workshop. So I'll help them
Yeah.
pick out a reference photo.
That's really
Um,
good. I've been to some workshops where you're just repeating what the teacher did, and I'm
yeah,
always trying to make it my own.
right.
And that throws a loop in things that makes it harder to teach, but it makes it much more interesting for the student.
Make it your own.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So we're talking about your workshops. And that really falls under E for educate. So we kind of jumped forward. We talked a little about art, your art style, and then we normally talk about product and presentation. What is your end product? So we talked about these workshops because it fit well there. So your workshop is a product, right?
Right.
And you get paid to come do these workshops. Hey, do they pay for your flights?
Yes, they pay for my flights. They pay for my luggage. They pay for my transportation back and forth. Even my
Score?
even my transportation from my house to the airport, they pay for. Yes.
Oh, really? So you
Yeah.
keep all those receipts, huh?
Oh yeah, yeah. It's just business. Yeah.
Good, good, good. And do you get that in the contract first? Like, how do you
Yes.
negotiate that?
It's all in a contract. And also, the contracts can be changed a little bit too, depending on who you're working with.
Yeah.
Um, they may say, we don't need to pay for transportation for you from the airport to the site because we'll pick you up at the airport. Um, and sometimes they'll even offer, instead of paying or staying at a hotel, you can stay at our house, things like that. But usually my contract's pretty standard, and it's usually pretty standard through all artists, color pencil artists, because we all kind of talk together about rates and how much for workshops. And
Mm-hmm.
sometimes it has to do with how many people are also in the workshop.
Right.
Um, I try to limit my workshop no more than 35 people because I like to make sure that I get everybody some personal help and personal attention.
Yeah.
Like I was saying, I walk around the room and help people with their work to a point where if they're at a point where they're stuck, knowing that everybody else is probably going to have the same type of problem on their drawing too, I'll bring them up front in the conference room and then have everybody come up and I'll do a little demonstration. How do you fix a blemish on this face here? Or there's a texture going through the nose here from your pigment. How do you get rid of that without ruining all the other texture? So those type of things I'll do like little demos to the
Very
class.
cool. Now, do you have a standard contract that you use, or do you ask them for their contract, or do you you mentioned the Color Pencil Society. How did you evolve and get this contract and get
I
into
think
this?
I think well, I've sponsored workshops in my chapter. The Color Pencil Society of America has chapters all over the country. I belong to the Chicago chapter. We have chapter members in Illinois, Iowa, Wisconsin, Indiana. And we've had workshops brought into our chapter. So I will bring those artists in, and usually, they have a contract too. So I've kind of learned about contracts with artists
Mm-hmm.
years ago and figure out, what you need in a contract and kind of base my contracts off of that. And then kind of base it off of what my needs are too. And what needs I know that my students will need also. And it might have to do with supplies too. How much supplies that the students will supply, and then how much I will bring in.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes the students won't have to bring any, like drafting film is one of the supplies they'll need, but
Right.
I can go to graphics and get the drafting film myself for free.
Oh, for
Graphics
free.
is,
Did they sponsor you, or they just
yeah,
love that
yeah.
you use it?
They're like one of my sponsors to the point where they had given me a whole roll of drafting film. It was like 43 inches wide by 20 yards,
Nice.
just to use one of my drawings in their traveling trade show booth.
Oh, cool. So you go to their trade show and you're in their booth?
No, my drawings are. My drawing is in their booth.
Oh, neat. How did you hook up with that?
Um, boy, I don't even remember. It's been such a long time ago. I think I was contacted by the CEO of graphics because I was asking about some of their products, and they noticed that a lot of my drawings were on graphics and winning awards, and excuse me, winning awards, and thought it'd be a good idea for us to form some sort of partnership to a point where they wanted to show my artwork in their trade show booths because I was using their products differently than what they usually use it. People
Yeah.
usually use it as, yeah.
What's it normally used as?
Um, it's usually, I guess, architects would use it. They would use pen and ink on it to draw floor plans,
Okay.
and then artists had started using it for color pencil, and they were using it, with color.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so a lot of color pencil artists were using it that way, and that's how I started using it until I
Mm-hmm.
started using it in this different fashion, where it got to be unique to the point where people were asking about workshops to get to know this technique. One thing about my technique that I've taught to my students is I can get from the beginning to the end of a drawing a lot faster than with my technique than you could if you had to actually draw every single little stroke.
Right.
And I don't have a lot of line work. It's all tone on tone on tone.
Mm-hmm.
I try to cut down on the line work.
Cool. Very neat. Wow, that is so cool. So let's see if we can recap a little bit and then back up. We've talked about your art and how it's a new style, which I think is fascinating because if you look at art history is really the people that get famous and recognized in art history are famous and recognized for creating new techniques. Maybe you'll go down in the books, huh?
Yeah.
And then you have partnered with the substrate maker, the company that makes the medium, the substrate, not the medium, but the substrate that you work on, and you patented that technique. That is fascinating. So your product is not just the artwork, but also the workshops. Now, with that partnership, that sponsorship with the graphics film company, um, is that like they give you free product? Do they also license the images from you or um
No,
okay.
no, just free product. Anytime I have a workshop, they ask me to just let them know what they need, how many sheets you need, uh, what sizes,
Hmm.
what thickness, and they send it to me.
Right. Now, they show your artwork off in their booth. Do they offer sales of prints at those shows
No,
as well? No, okay.
no, no.
Okay. Very interesting. So, what other products do you make out of your artwork? So, you have the originals for sale?
The originals for sale, and then
Hmm.
I also sell prints.
Hmm.
I'm not.
Do you do commission work as well?
Yes, I do commission work also.
Uh-oh, there you are.
Oh yeah.
Now, when you do commission work for people, can you tell us a little bit about that process, um, and what it entails, what the process is, and how you ensure that they get the best product possible and that you protect yourself at the same time?
Well, the problem with commissions is that they find your artwork, they want to do a commission, and it's based off of your style. That's why they contact you.
Of course.
But then they want to try to art direct everything as you go, and that doesn't work out for artists, and that's why I don't like that many commissions. Um, but I usually uh, set up a photo shoot, and we usually take maybe 200 to 300 shots,
Hmm.
and then I come up with maybe a half a dozen shots that I like, that I would think would be great for a drawing.
Right.
Um, and then present it to the client, and the client will pick out that photo, that image, and then I may do a couple of sketches with that
Hmm.
image, um, and then present that, and then go ahead and start working on the drawing. There'll be a certain spot where I'll actually go back to the client and show them work in progress, maybe after a week or so, to
Hmm.
make sure that we're on the same track.
Hmm.
um, and usually it might take a month or 2 months, depending on what else I'm working on at the time.
Hmm.
Um, Usually you get money up front, you may get money in the middle of it, and you get money at the end.
Cool. So you do thirds. Very cool.
Yeah,
So deposit up front, money in the middle, money on receipt.
on receipt.
It's interesting to talk to people about their commission work because I've had a couple of artists that do commission work. Like, I'm going to compare you to Garrett Owen, Owen Garrett, excuse me. He's a hyper realist pencil artist in Canada known as the Pencil Neck. And he does these hyper realistic drawings of antique oil mining rigs
Okay.
for the CEOs of like mining companies and stuff. And he's interesting because he'll do this process where he gets the photos and he composites them in Photoshop and
Hmm.
he puts them together because the person commissioning the work will often say, I want this mining rig with this antique truck and this kind of, shack over here or whatever.
Hmm.
And then he sends them a kind of grainy print of the composited piece and has them sign on the print. And once that's done, he doesn't let them see the work in progress
Oh,
at
interesting.
all. They get no input, no feedback until they get the work delivered. And his contract or process is very fascinating to me because he sells the whole kit and caboodle in one fell swoop. He basically makes prints. His wife is a master framer. She has a framing business. They'll make a run of prints. They'll frame all the prints. They get little plaques on the prints, and then the company buys the entire run of prints to give away at their golf outing or
Mhm.
to their top salespeople or whatever, their rewards. And then they throw in the original as a bonus sort of for the CEO or whatever. But it's a fascinating process and it's a fascinating business model. And what's interesting about Owen Garrett is he does this hyperrealism like you, slightly different technique, but he's a colorblind So he only
Oh,
does black and white. And he has this huge range of values because of that. So I always find that fascinating. We also have talked to a number of other oil painters and stuff like that about their process as well. So thank you for sharing your process with us. Let's talk about presentation. Do you have any hard and fast rules about how you present your work, or any tips or tricks?
I don't go cheap when it comes to. I have all my work framed, especially for shows, and I used to frame them just a metal frame and hang them in shows until I took a couple pieces to a gallery to show my work. And one of the things that the gallery owner mentioned was the cheap frame. So since then, I've
Mm,
never used a metal frame since. I actually have a framer about 3 blocks from my house here in Chicago, and he has 3 frames that are in the computer that are under my name. Where if I bring a piece in, I tell him I want my tier 1, my tier 2, or my tier 3 frame. My tier 1 frame, they're all by the same company, Romano. They're out of Italy.
uh-huh.
Um, the tier 1 frame is the highest tier that depending on what show that I'm going to enter in, they'll have him frame. And the front of the frame is silver, but the front of the frame is black, but the side is silver, or the front of
Ooh.
the frame is silver and the side is black.
Ooh.
Um,
Nice. Is it wood or metal or
it's wood. It's wood.
okay? Is it a
And
type of wood?
no, it's just a hard wood, but it has like a little texture in it too.
Mm-hmm.
The front of it is more of a silver or patina looking,
Mm-hmm.
um, and then the black is on the side is like a gloss black.
So it really is kind of accenting and bringing out the texture of your work, right?
Right,
Coordinating. The
right.
frame is accenting and coordinating with your work and augmenting that texture that's inherent in the substrate. Yeah.
Yes. And then you have to pick out a mat, and that's kind of the trickiest part is picking out a mat that goes with my pieces.
Oh yeah.
I want a white mat, but there's so many different colors of white that the framer
Yeah.
has. So trying to pick out that right white mat,
Mm-hmm.
not too white, not too creamy, not too stark, doesn't have any yellow in it. So
Right.
I try to stay away from things like that. So he has the mat uh, number on his computer too. So when I order something, he knows exactly which mat I'm going to use. So
Yeah,
really, all my framing is consistent.
that is fantastic. That's a really great tip to have the framing consistent because then you could put pieces from different shows into a new show, a more recent show, and they're not going to look disjointed.
Right, right.
Now, do you use double mats or how wide is your mat? And do you use single or double?
It's my mats are usually about 3 inches wide,
Mm-hmm.
showing 3 inches wide, and they're thick. They're like uh is it 8 millimeters? I forget the size of it, but it's a thick mat.
Okay.
So it does cause, you do see some distance between the mat and the picture. And
Well, that's
really
very important. I mean, the whole point of the mat is to keep the artwork off the
the
glass,
frame.
right?
Right.
I've always loved double and even triple matting for that added depth. It really is classy.
But when you have a piece that's 35 by 46, it gets to be pretty expensive.
Yes.
And the frame themselves, my frames usually run me about $600 or $700 just
Mm,
for the framing.
wow.
So,
Yeah.
and then because I do so much work with these guys that I always get like a 20% discount on everything. So everything
Hmm.
is a little cheaper. But knowing that, I may have something framed and it may be sitting in my studio for a year or 2 years before it's sold, um, it gets to be pretty costly. If you're an artist who your sole way of making money is your artwork and that's what you've been doing all your life, that's kind of hard. But I fortunately I'm a retired graphic designer, so this is kind of like something I'm doing now since I'm retired. I'm doing this full time.
Right.
Um,
And it's your passion though. I mean,
Yeah.
you've created a new technique and you're reflecting the value of your work in the framing. Um, so let's actually talk pricing just for a minute because I think it's important. We often hide this from people. We hide it from other artists or we hide it from the client. But I think it's really important that we actually share the amount of effort that goes into matting and framing and presenting work because it's like a Rolex, right?
Mhm.
Um, if you want something to be valuable, if you want something to be perceived as being valuable, and for somebody to be proud and willing to pay top dollar for your work, then you have to present it in the best light possible. And how do you do that? You share the attention to detail that you put into it. So your work is all about attention to detail. And it sounds like your matting and framing is too. So when you mat and frame, and then you put your piece in it, how do you price your work? How do you value your work? I've heard different techniques, for pricing a piece. In wholesale and retail, you take the cost to make the product and you double the price to get wholesale. And then you double it again, or even 2.5, double and a little bit more for retail. But that doesn't work with our artists so much. How do you what is your general formula for pricing a piece?
I actually have a formula that I figured out that, and I work at by inch, by square inch.
Ooh.
So depending on the size of the piece, I put it into my formula, um, and it usually comes out pretty close to what I think it should be. And it kind of keeps all my pieces consistent in pricing.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes I have a piece that I know took me a lot longer to do, so I'll jack up the price a little bit for that. Or it could be a piece that's getting a lot of attention. It's been a lot of international magazines. I may jack that price up just slightly also too.
Right. Well, of course. So tell us a little bit about this formula. I'm fascinated. I want to hear.
Well, I don't know the formula off the top of my head, but I have it a spreadsheet in Excel that I figure out the formula where I just multiply, and I have a coefficient number that I multiply um, uh, the number of hours that I may spend on a drawing, and that kind of helps me with the price. Or I have a coefficient that I will multiply it by the size of the piece
So what
based
is
on
the
the square inches.
coefficient? Like what are the
It's just
things
it's a
that go
number.
into the formula? So
It might
hours
have to do
spent.
hours spent, materials used. Now my materials themselves to actually, it's not like a painter where you spend a lot of money on brushes and paint. My materials, my expendables are pretty inexpensive when it comes to the drafting film, the color pencils, the color pencil stick, the erasers, things like that. That's kind of the least of my expenses. The more expensive pieces are the framing, the matting. Um, yeah, that's probably that's the biggest expense for any artist is a framing and matting.
Yeah, yeah. And then your time spent too. You've got to have a price
Right.
for your time,
Yeah.
your hourly. So you definitely track your time. Do you also include the time for the photo shoot? Say you're doing commission work?
Well, actually, it's not just the time for the photo shoot; it's actually the expense for the photo shoot too. Because I may go to, I usually rent out a photographer's studio to do my photo shoots because
Oh.
she'll have all the lighting set up for me, and it's
Mm-hmm.
one stop that I just have to go to, and we all meet there. We shoot there.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I'm not worrying about shooting outside, and I'm not worrying about the weather.
Yeah.
And everything is all set up and ready to go once I walk in, and I'm in and out within an hour.
Oh, that's a great idea. Rent a photo studio for your shoot. I love that idea. So, and you incorporate all that into your pricing. Brilliant. That's
Mhm.
really good. You've got to value your work. You really do. Um, so we're jumping around today. We've talked about art, and I'm fascinated that you patented your style. That is so cool. We've talked a little bit about product, the different products you do. We've talked about presentation now. We already hit on educate a little bit with your workshops. Let's talk about amplify next and how you get bigger and how you get the word out. Essentially, amplify is a fancy term for marketing, right? What are some tips and tricks that you've used to get out the word about your style and your methods and to promote your work?
I think probably social media is probably the biggest. And I think when it comes to social media, Instagram for me, I get the biggest bang for my buck. Facebook a little bit, but usually you see a lot more artists on Instagram. That way you can get your word out to a vast amount of people, and then also some major art magazines also are on Instagram, and they
Hmm.
find you also that way too.
Use
Um,
hashtags?
I use hashtags. I have a whole list of hashtags that I use, and also the graphics film company, they've actually helped me with my hashtags. So um, those drawings will actually be sent back to their sites too.
So
So
you
yeah, they help
tag
me out there.
them?
I tag them too. Yeah, I tag them, and I'll also tag the models that I use too, if they want me to. So it'll go back to their site because most of the models I use are, they could be normal people, but I've been using one model. She's a fine arts model, so I
Hmm.
put hashtags in there so they go back to her fine arts page, um,
Oh,
and see the kind of work that she does. And actually, when it goes back to her page too, some of my drawings that I've done of her are also on her page too. So she lets people know that this is me, the fine arts model, but this is the type of work that comes out of the artist that actually I work with. So
neat.
social media, Facebook and Instagram probably are about the biggest,
Hmm.
but they actually just drive everybody to your website. People think that your website actually is the biggest uh, draw, but actually social media takes you to the website. If you didn't have that, you people wouldn't be able to find your website unless it's by word of mouth.
So it's actually probably more of tagging and less of hashtagging because there's two types of tagging, right? So there's hashtags that use the hashtag, and then there's the at symbol that links
Yeah.
you to the other person's profile. So you
Yes.
use a combination of both of
Do a
those.
combination of both of those. Yes. Yes. And
Yeah.
I'm not a social media savvy, so I have my graphics people. They kind of help me. Um, they give a whole list of hashtags for me to use for when I place it on Facebook, or if I'm going to place this on Instagram.
So
So I
they
just do copy
research
and
it.
paste.
They
Well,
research it for you, and then you have like a folder or a file where you copy and paste.
I just copy and paste. Yes.
Cool. Yeah, that's a real time saver. So you don't have to think about it.
No.
Do you have different hashtags you use for different artwork or you just use
No.
okay, cool.
I
So
may I
once
may
you've
throw
got it,
yeah. What I
got
may
it.
add a couple of them, something different once in a while, but
Hmm.
um, I don't really spend a lot of time doing that. I may, a lot of the stuff I do, I'll post like works in progress, but I don't have that type of time to spend on social media as much as some people do. I mean, that's for you could hire somebody to do that for yourself to do that for you all day.
Oh yeah, it can take up your whole life. So how often do you post then?
I may post once every 2 weeks, depending on what I'm working on. If I'm in the
Oh
middle of a
wow.
drawing, if
Uh-huh.
I'm in the middle of a drawing, I may post once a week on the progress, or if there's a
Uh-huh.
certain part of the drawing that might be interesting for people to work on, like a veil or the technique in a veil. I'll post as I'm drawing it, maybe a video.
So you'll
Um,
do a live?
yeah, I do a live one, not a live, but a video.
Okay. And then you post it after.
And I post it after, yes.
Do you ever use stories?
Yes, once in a while. But again, I don't spend a lot of time on, I mean,
Yeah.
I want to, this is fun for me for, as I'm, retired now. I
So you got
don't
to
want it to
keep it
make,
fun.
yeah, I don't want to make it a whole new job for me.
Yeah.
And then I have some major magazines that will post my artwork, and um, I'll repost it to my different sites and everything. Artist Magazine, Artist International, Artist Collectors or Connoisseur. Um, they'll highlight some of my work and they'll post it, and I'll pass it on to the people who follow me.
Oh, neat. How do you get into those magazines?
A lot of times it may be a call for artists and you're selected. And also, what I also do is, um, because I've been in some of these magazines several times, they may have a special promotion for writing an ad. And so I'll even run a half-page ad or a quarter-page ad just to help re-promote your work or promote your portraits. In American Connoisseur magazine or American Art Collectors magazine, they're going to have a directory in one of the issues that have portrait artists in it. And they give you a nice rate to put a small little ad in there. So when people are looking for portrait artists, they can look at this directory that they've come up with and find a portrait artist that kind of fits what they're looking for.
Interesting. And you found that successful.
I found it successful. I mean, I'm getting a lot more notice and recognition. It's just something I've recently started doing in the past year or so.
Mm-hmm.
Um, it's almost like during the pandemic when people weren't spending money, during the recession years ago, people weren't spending money, but the people that were actually making it out the other end were the people that were actually spending the money when other people weren't.
Mm. Right, right. Interesting. Where do you find those calls for submission to get into these magazines? Are they listed on their sites or is there one master site?
It could be listed on their site for their magazine, or it could be on Cafe Entry, which is a site where artists go to enter other shows across the country.
Oh,
But
cafe entry. I
Cafe,
had
yeah.
forgotten about that site. I hadn't heard that term in years. Oh, I forgot about that.
But yeah, most of the times it's magazines will send out an email blast saying that uh, August issue is going to be on figurative art. Submit your entries, and you'll go onto their magazine on their website, submit 5 entries, and they'll let you know if they've selected any of the entries or not. Or that Drawing Magazine used to have a drawing contest. One magazine has a drawing over 60 contest, so all artists that are over 60 can enter this contest, and you can win a little bit of money. It's not a whole lot of money, but it's a lot of recognition, and you're in their magazine and on their site.
Yeah, and that's social proof.
Yeah.
It's called social proof. How did you find the magazines? Did you just go to the bookstore and look at magazines that you thought you'd fit in and then go to their website and join their newsletter and you get these blasts then?
Well, I started looking at these magazines many, many years ago. I mean, even back in high school.
Mm-hmm.
So I've always known these magazines are out, and then new magazines have come up throughout the years. And you walk into the bookstore and you see the rack of magazines, and then one section is art magazines, and you think, wow, I'd love to be in those magazines. And sooner or later, you start getting your artwork recognized more and more around the country and around the world, and then these opportunities start coming before you. And um, sometimes there's opportunities that you really can't pass up, or they want to do a little editorial about your artwork. That also helps too.
Yeah,
But
definitely.
yeah, and then I'm always getting an email blast from these magazines, or um, uh, they may have a show that's coming up every year at the
Hmm.
same time. So I kind of have that on my calendar, knowing that okay, that show's coming up, so I got to make sure I have a piece that's going to fit that show ready to upload.
Yeah. Speaking of shows, are there any particular conferences that you, as a fine artist and a hyper realistic artist at that, go to on like an annual basis? Are there any shows that you love and go to all the time or recommend?
Well, I think for me, my biggest show is the Color Pencil Society of America show. I'm a member of their of that group and a member of their local chapter. I used to be the president here of the local chapter years ago.
Cool.
But the reason why I like that show the best because you're with other color pencil artists and they become friends of yours throughout the years, and you follow them and you try to mimic their artwork, and you've learned from them, you've learned workshops from them. But also the prize money in their international show, which is every year about this time, is the biggest prize money of all the shows I've entered. I mean, first prize is a little over $5,000. Most shows that I entered, top prize may be $500, $1,000. But the
Yeah.
Color Pencil Society they range from 5,000 to like maybe a few $100s in their awards. So I like to enter that show every year. It's always a tough show to to enter.
Mhm.
I've been fortunate enough to enter it and get accepted in quite a bit.
Interesting. Are there any shows outside of your field that you kind of do? I'll go back to Owen Garrett there for a minute, or Maria Brophy was on the show, and they both talked about how they go to shows that aren't within the art world.
Yeah.
They align their art marketing with the niche they're in. So, like Maria Brophy is the agent for Drew Brophy, who's a renowned surf artist. So they go to surf events.
Yeah.
They go to, and then he'll do a demo on a surfboard. Or Owen Garrett, he doesn't go to an art show. He goes to an oil mining show, an oil conference in Dubai, Are there any, but you do fine art portraits. Are there any conferences that you think you would consider
Well,
going to?
probably the Realism Conference they have every year
Oh,
down in
okay.
Florida.
Okay.
Um, but the shows I've entered, most of the shows I do enter aren't all color pencil artists.
Yeah.
You have painters, sculptors. I mean, one show that I'm in right now, it's called Real People that I enter every year, and it's way out in the Chicago suburbs. And then there's a show that I'm going to be in on Sunday that I'm going to reception for the Chicago Alliance of Visual Artists. And that's artists in the Chicago area that are all different mediums. I like to enter those shows because I like to be able to have my color pencil artwork stand up with painters, sculptures, or other mediums.
I
The
like
color
that
pencil,
idea.
the Color Pencil Society work I like to show in that because it's a prestigious show, and a lot of my friends that are color pencil artists, majority of my friends that are color pencil artists, are in those shows, and it's a show that's hard to get accepted in. It's a color pencil show that takes entries from all over the world,
Wow.
and that's why it's hard to get into.
Very cool. I have my fingers crossed because I didn't want to forget to ask you about your new artistic endeavor, your new kind of art style of combining hyperrealism and abstraction. That's fascinating to me because it's an oxymoron. How do you combine hyperrealistic portraiture with abstraction?
Well, that's kind of tough too. What I have to do is I try to do something that was totally abstract one time, and I lasted for maybe about 30 seconds before I actually got physically nauseous. I couldn't do it. I froze.
But wait, if you threw up on the painting, wouldn't that be art?
Well, yeah, that could be.
There you go.
But what I've started to do is you get to a point where I was doing realism, hyperrealism, and I wanted to do something a little more interesting. So I've actually started taking the drawing that I have up in the Chicago Alliance of Visual Artists show this Sunday. It's called Picture of My Dreams. And the face itself is real, but
Okay.
the hair and everything around is all abstract. So I try to incorporate things like that where I can in the drawing to make it a little more abstract. Even to a point where there's a drawing that I'm working on, like this one here.
Ooh, do show us. I love to see work in progress. Ooh. It looks
So
like galaxies.
so now it's actually flower. I have a couple of drawings I've been working on where I actually explode flour.
Like baking flour.
Like baking flour, yeah.
On the piece?
No, on the model.
Oh, cool.
And see the picture why the baking flour is exploding. So I'm actually doing stuff like that where you start getting more abstract, like here on the top.
Yeah, yeah. It looks like galaxies. It's beautiful. It's neat.
So yeah,
Well,
I'm trying to take the portraits I usually do are not your traditional looking portraits that you usually see that come out of maybe a drawing class. I try to make them a little more innovative, a little more interesting than a typical portrait.
right, right. Always looking for that neat angle and composition and
Right.
something a little bit different, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, before we get into the last letter of the appeals acronym. So we've talked about art, We've talked about product. We've talked about presentation. We've talked about educating and amplifying and licensing and contracts. And the last one's going to be success. But before we do that, I want to talk just a little bit about your career as a product designer and a packaging designer prior to this recent incarnation of you being this fine artist. So, can you just recap your whole life in
Sure.
about 5 seconds?
Yeah. Really spent my whole life from the time I walked out of college until retirement in package design. So I've worked on some iconic packages that you would buy in your grocery store, to the point where from Aunt Jemima syrup to when Aunt Jemima used to have the handkerchief around her head and they modernized her to the point where now, she's no longer on the package. Michael Jordan on Gatorade, products that you've never even heard before, and they're now bagel bites. Things like that were brand new products years ago.
So, you
Laundry.
studied packaging design in
No,
college?
no,
No.
there was no course. I graduated in design in college, and um, somehow I took my portfolio around different agencies in Chicago, and
Okay.
for some reason I was hitting on packaging design because that was like it seemed like the more design agencies were doing packaging, and
Mm-hmm.
it was paying a lot more money, and that's where I kind of landed, and that's where I've been in my whole life, to the point where I was just not doing the graphics and creating the graphics for packages, but later on in life I started playing around with even doing product design, designing products that actually
Mm-hmm.
go in the package.
And how did you transition from packaging design? So you must have been doing a lot of that by hand, right? How did you transition from packaging design to fine art, hyper realistic portraiture? Where was that moment? What was that catalyst that you said, I got to do this?
Well, all my life I've been an artist. That's all I wanted to be. When I was a little kid, I wanted to be a commercial artist. So I wanted to always
Yeah.
be drawing. So my whole life has been nothing but art. And usually you have people that you work with who do fine arts on the side. So you go to
Yeah.
their shows and you're interested in it. I had a boss that I worked with that he was showing in different galleries in Chicago area. So I thought, wow, that's pretty cool. You work at the design agency all day long, and then now you're going to a gallery opening with your work in it. So I got interested in doing that. And there was one day that he had a contest for the employees where you had to come up with a piece of artwork. And the gallery owner that was in the bottom of our building was going to judge it. And I did a piece. He gave me first place. I think I got like $500 for it.
Oh, cool.
And I thought, well, great. I going to keep going on doing this. And it was in colored pencil at the time too.
Yeah.
So that's all I've been working in with colored pencil. And I knew that as I was working full time, once I retired, I still wanted to continue doing this. And now I get to spend as much time as I want doing it.
Very interesting. That is fascinating. So you don't have to be one or the other and you can transition.
Sure.
All right, let's talk about the last letter of the appeals acronym, S for success. How do you measure success, Tracy? How do you define and measure and celebrate success?
Well, for me, it's not the money. um, I don't make as much money selling my artwork as I did in my professional field. Um, so it's not the money, it's really the recognition. It's recognition in major magazines or magazines I've always wanted to be into. It's people recognizing your work all over the world and wanting to follow your work and asking you how you did this. And then you also find artists that you just love to follow, and then they're coming back to you and saying, that picture you did is just magnificent, that's beautiful, how'd you do that? And being recognized in different shows side by side with other artists and winning awards. So that for me, that's my success. It really, and if I get a collector who wants to buy my pieces, that's fine. Um, I sell a few prints. I don't sell a lot of prints. I do this for fun. And then all the other gravy that comes with it is fantastic. But for me, success is just being recognized for my work on a high level.
Mm-hmm.
working in graphic design all my life. I've always worked with big clients like Kraft and Quaker Oats and some of the biggest corporations. So all my work I've done in graphic wise has been at the top level. So that's where I want my fine arts work to be, also is at the top level.
Well, you have definitely hit the top level with your features in magazines and your workshops that you get to fly around and get paid to do. Your work is top notch. It is
Thank you.
beautiful. I want to thank you for all of the fantastic information you shared with us today.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks,
Appreciate it.
Tracy. All right. So thank you. And I will pause this now.